Hello once again. Thanks for coming on board with Creative's Flow with a VO. I'm still your curious host and the VO, Tim DDB, eager to know how creative people think, work, play, and where they draw their inspirations. You know, I started this podcast because of that curiosity, and I've been learning so much from these people and from your responses. So, I hope that you're learning things about this amazing business that I just happen to be lucky enough to work and thrive in. And as I thought even deeper about this, it's because it's time for me to give back. So whether you're an actor or a creative trying to gain some inspiration, I sure hope that this is doing just that. Today we're going to hear from the, quote, meandering but mostly coherent mind, end quote, of Executive Creative Director John Carstens. He's an award-winning writer who's worked coast to coast in many of the big-name agencies, and now is currently back with us in Chicago at Team DDB, which is actually a 9-agency organization, and his gig is built around doing spots for the U.S. Army. And if you've seen the new Slice of Life Army spots, that's some of the work that John and his team are doing right now. So with no further lead-in, let's jump right in and say hello to Mr. John Carstens. Good morning, John.
We have you in our clutches now.
Dude, thank you so much for coming on the show.
The rain in Spain falls mainly on the plane.
Lovely. So it looks like we're still working from home, huh?
Yeah, I go in about at least once a week. Officially, we're supposed to be back 3 days a week.
He's an executive creative director,
especially
in Chicago.
The Army is such a gigantic beast, and we're multiple agencies. So we've got one floor. We used to have our own floor. I would not want to be in commercial real estate right now.
No kidding, right?
We relinquished that floor, consolidated on one floor for all the DDB Chicago folks. But because we're such a large team, we have to stagger it.
Right. Are they still using their studios? I know they built a beautiful room.
Yeah. But you're at home, right?
I am right now, yes. But I'll still go into the studios. I've had to go into the studios. There's certain things that they're like, they said, well, can you work from home? And I say, yes, but this is such a big deal. Let's go to a studio. And yes, there's some commercial creators that still want to come in. And I got to tell you, John, I miss that a lot. First and foremost, because, there's camaraderie when we're together. Things happen differently when we're together. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing like seeing this to know if I'm on track or I'm not, right. Or you saying, hey, this is great, but let's try this. Or me trying something and me just looking at your face saying, no, that didn't work. Or looking at your face and say, okay, they're good. Let's keep moving in that direction. You don't get that unless, you're face to face. Or
I would have disappointed you on that front, though. I've always had people telling me, like, yeah, John's so hard to read. I don't know if he's happy or not. So I think my stoicism has helped me adapt to the world where I can't see people's expressions and they can't see mine because they wouldn't know anyway.
Right. It's funny though. I mean, if I've got you laugh, especially if it's a funny spot, of course, but if I've got you laughing or I have you at least smiling and I see your head nodding, that's a tell. If you're completely bland-faced, I don't have it, or I don't have you at least, And every voice actor, every actor has been there where they look to the creative, where they look to the producer and say, where can we go with this? Where can I take it? Or, do we have another thing? Or there have been instances, John, where people have said to me, hey, it's really, your voice is perfect for this. It's just, it's just not working. Let's try something new. And as a seasoned actor or as a really good actor, you sit for a second and you read between the lines, or you come up with a new idea. You let the muse in, you open the door and let the muse in, and you try something. And hope to God it sticks. Hopefully it works, That's our secret sauce.
Yeah.
And on your end, we look to you for guidance, to hit the right words, to give the right emotions, because you pulled us in for a reason. That's how I look at it. We got the job for a reason. You heard something. We touched you first before we can touch your audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's how I look at it.
Yeah, I'm eager to get into that because I'm looking at your list of questions. The direction, what we're looking for and the direction we give depends. And there's two different kinds of performances. If you just want to make it, binary like that, there's the kind of the brand voiceover, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which generally, with some exceptions, plenty of exceptions, is less of a character voice and probably doesn't have the same kind of like improvisation and, well, certainly not as much improvisation opportunity because that is some pretty fucking heavily vetted language that we're using to nail the strategic proposition and the reasons to believe and all that. But then when you get into characters, right, that's where the improvisation opportunity happens. That's when, real performance. I mean, not that there's not performance in a brand voiceover, because you still want to kind of understand the mindset
of your target audience.
Well, actually, no, the mindset of the person who is speaking. Okay, so
gotcha.
where are you and who are you talking to?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure everybody gives that kind of direction for that kind of role, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're the voice of the Army, or you're the voice of Ready Whip, it's usually something about your demographic that comes off in your voice and your voice texture. You kind of meet our gender and ethnic requirements, and you got the inflections just right, and we think you can emphasize the key adjectives that deliver the value proposition of brand X.
Mm-hmm.
But particularly in the case of Army, we are doing something different, very different from what they've done in the past. I mean, they've dabbled in this a little bit, but generally, the Army has spoken in the voice of the general at the lectern, talking to a lot of people, right? And so it's it's the veteran voice, not literally veteran, but somebody who's been in the Army for a while. They've seen things, done things.
Mm-hmm.
They've got some wisdom to impart. They've got some authority, a little bit of gravitas. And we were thinking, and I see this with my own kids. My older son has a much stronger effect on the behavior of my younger son than my wife or I do.
Sure.
And I was the same way. My older brother had an older sister had the conversations they had with me when I was a punk ass bitch teenager and getting my act together had a much stronger influence on me than I think my parents did. My parents, they love me. They say all the right things, but there's something about what we call the near peer.
Neat. I like that.
Somebody who's a little bit older rather than
Mm-hmm.
a lot older. And so rather than the general at the lectern, let's make it an interpersonal conversation with a soldier who is closer in age to you. And so, that obviously that affects the casting that we do. So we try to make sure, there are exceptions, right? Sometimes we do want to have the gravitas of like the kind of the senior leader, but in most of the cases, what we've done so far, and we've mixed it up. I mean, we haven't identified like the one brand voiceover. We want to actually reflect kind of the diversity of a younger generation. And so we have different voices, male and female, different demographics and different executions. And, they roughly sound like they're probably like in their, mid-20s.
Sure.
A little bit closer in age.
Perfect age for a soldier, for a veteran soldier.
Right. And so they sound a little bit more relatable to the headphone-wearing 17-year-old. The place I try to put them is, if it's a guy, you're the older brother of the person that you're talking to, and you're sitting at the kitchen table. So even though you've got some kind of like amped up language in here, again, you're not announcing to the masses. You know and love the person that you're talking to, and you're at the kitchen table. So they're close to you, so you don't need to shout.
Mm-hmm.
And the way you're delivering this thing is in a way that is something that they can trust, that you really mean it.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to a place, I think, again, with a brand voiceover, people kind of think like, oh, it's a mass audience, and so I'm going to speak to the masses. Almost always, again, exceptions to everything. Almost always, if there's somebody in the booth, I'll say, you're talking to somebody in the booth with you.
One person. You're talking to one person.
Right. This is a one-person, one-on-one, interpersonal conversation, and it's somebody you know and love,
Mm-hmm.
Particularly in this case. But that's that very different though when you start talking about like character voices. I'll be honest, I haven't. I've done a lot of comedy in my past. It's been a little bit. With the Army, we recently did a campaign that I would not call comedy, but at least got some levity.
Are you talking about your most recent spots?
Yeah, the Know Your Army campaign.
Dude, they're brilliant. They're brilliant. They're a slice of life for what soldiers really go through in their day-to-day. Instead of, like you said, the grizzle gravitas, join the Army, that kind of stuff. It's not that. It's especially the one with the baby. Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's a slice of life and what a soldier would go through in their day-to-day. Correct me if I'm wrong. There is no voiceover.
Yeah.
It's what's happening in the scene, right?
It's silence your first, although, we have voiceover. I mean, we do other things beyond the videos. So, we've got some streaming radio and some other things. But, yeah, and it's funny. I thought, honestly, it'd be a little bit more of a struggle to get the Army to accept doing something like that. But in fact, it was almost like this is what they've been waiting for.
Mm-hmm.
The longer you've been in the Army and the more inculcated you are to the Army values and the principles and the purpose and the core values and all those kinds of things. Like I mean, it's just such a strong culture that you become a part of, and it becomes a part of you. And if you've been doing it for a long time, you want that to be how you kind of project the Army brand to the outside, to young people, to bring them in. And we often have to explain that those things are not always what resonate. They have no obligation to listen to you yet.
Mm-hmm.
And then once they get on the inside, they can start to understand and feel more deeply in the marrow the things that you feel right now.
Right.
But in terms of like again, I use this term often, the headphone wearing, doom scrolling 17-year-old. And if you start talking to them about the path of sacrifice, for example,
mm-hmm.
that's not exactly the best way to put your foot in the door, especially with people that are not already predisposed to join the Army, people that are not already in military communities or come from military families. And the Army just has, so many things to talk about and so many benefits. It's not right for everybody, but there are more people it is right for than realize. And how do we get this point across? And it's something we have to explain a lot, and it's because it is such a strong culture there.
Yeah,
and everybody in the Army feels it so deeply that they want the people on the outside to feel it as deeply as they do. And you have to explain that's going to take some time.
Right.
You have to introduce yourself if they're not already predisposed to join your organization. So something like this Know Your Army campaign, more lighthearted, more slice of life. They understood that argument, and a lot of our clients, recognize that there are aspects of the Army life and the Army lifestyle that people don't understand. They think people think it's a sensory deprivation tank. I will never have a boyfriend or girlfriend again. I will not be allowed to have a dog. I'll have no family life. I'll be screamed at by drill sergeants every morning for my entire Army career. I'll be sleeping in barracks.
And at first, beds. Yes, you will be.
yeah. The first 10 weeks, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But not everything is like the first 10 weeks.
Right.
And but the first 10 weeks.
Were you a soldier?
No. Yeah, I when DDB approached me about this job, I told them that I'm a curious choice. I don't think I'm right for this. I don't think I'm the right casting. I grew up in rural Wisconsin, so I grew up with a lot of people that joined the service. Probably more Marines than Army.
Okay.
And I saw the transformative effect that the military can have on some people that I went to high school with. That, oh my God, what's going to happen to this person when they leave high school? Boy, are they going to be a wayward soul?
Right.
I cannot imagine them having a future. And then they come back and do an assembly at the high school, and they've been in the Marines, they've been in the Army, they've been in the Navy, and they're clean cut, they're fit, their face has seen some sun. And there's confidence in the eyes, they make eye contact, and they're well-spoken. And it's like, holy shit, what a transformation.
You bet.
But you don't want to only tell those stories of the people that seem to have no hope, and we gave them hope and we transformed. It's the My Fair Lady thing.
Mm-hmm.
It is actually a great opportunity for people that have choices, for the good students, for the student athletes.
Right.
And how do you get that message out? What the folks at DDB were saying to me is we need to have people that are already indoctrinated. Yes, as I describe it, we need to have a team of both skeptics and believers. And so we have, let's make sure we have some veterans. Let's make sure we have some people that came from military families. But let's also have some soft-bellied, civilians like me who, and I would call myself a skeptic, not a cynic, a skeptic as in, I don't think that's going to work. I think that will play internally at the Army, but I don't think that's going to work with the uninitiated 17-year-old, Gen Z prospect. And so to constantly interrogate what we think will work, what are the things you need to say to get somebody interested in the first place, and then continue down the journey to actually finally making that decision, because there are a lot of steps to joining the Army.
Mm-hmm.
Exams and the processing. You have to take the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, a standardized test, and you have to get a certain score, and you have to kind of guide them along the path. And so it's not a buy now situation. And so how do you keep them engaged? How do you answer the questions? How do you alleviate their doubts along the way? And being somebody who does not come from a military family, even if I look at the outer rungs of my extended family, there's really nothing much in the way of like military service. And DDB told me that the fact that you think you're not right for this is why you are right for this.
Mm-hmm. Exactly what I was thinking, dude.
Because we need that mindset. We need somebody who is constantly questioning, interrogating, like what will actually get through, as opposed to somebody who's already a believer who just assumes that other people believe already.
Or want to shove it down the listening audiences or the prospects, if you will, throat.
Right.
Your approach is very much, like I said, it's a slice of life. And you can see that they're living normal lives, everyday normal lives. The camping scene and the parents in bed scene with the baby crying. And I mean, those are normal. So yes, I guess I can have a life. I will get married. I will have a dog. I will have normal days. But to get there, you need to get through the drill sergeant and all that stuff. And if you're a wandering soul and you're kind of wondering how you're going to get from, again, they may be a star pupil, but they're not going to get into college because of funds or whatever. This is a way for them to get the training they need to take step C, Yeah,
and in this country, if you want to have an assurance of, at the very least, a basic, comfortable middle-class existence, you want some semblance of a safety net. Military service is the way to go.
Yeah.
Because if you fulfill your commitment, and you're going to have access to all these incredible benefits for the rest of your life.
You know what? So now I got to the beginning of this. We jumped right into all the way to the end of the script. So you are you said you're from Wisconsin?
I am from Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Well, that's what I say.
Oh, sure.
That's right. The land of airplanes and overalls, Packer land. I'm a cheesehead. But actually, when I was in third grade, we actually moved to a little town just a little bit west of there. It's called Omro. It's a town of 3,000 people. There were 95 people in my graduating class. Future Farmers of America was a strong organization there.
Sure.
When I went off to college, my roommate was from Central Jersey, and when we first talked on the phone, he talked about where he is from, and he was from pretty affluent area in Central New Jersey, a large Jewish population. He went to New York all the time to see Broadway shows, and then I talked. Yeah, I'm from Wisconsin, and we had tractor day at my high school. I had nowhere to park, and the dudes that drove their tractors, they got the girls.
See?
And so he told some of his family friends about this.
And free cheese for life, eh?
Yeah. Certain kind of cheese, yeah. And he told some of his family friends back home about this guy. Oh my God, my new roommate. Let me tell you some of these stories. Everybody back in his hometown called me Tractor Boy. Even though I was not a farmer myself, but just like, wow, that's going to be a big culture shock. And he's a very good friend of mine still. I mean, we stayed very good friends. I think just like we were such an odd couple, and we were roommates for 2 years. But my parents are not from Wisconsin, so I think some of the things that everybody around me were doing, I did not do. I felt a little bit like a fish out of water.
Where are they from originally?
My mom's from Seattle. My dad's from the Spokane area, so Washington State.
Oh, okay, so Washington State. Okay, both beautiful places, man.
Yeah. My mom's old neighborhood is called Ballard in Seattle, and at the time it was just the sleepy little Norwegian community. Now it's where all the hipsters are. And it's just kind of funny to think that this is where my retired school teacher mom grew up. As you're seeing the beards and the craft beer and all that pop up around there.
How things swing in neighborhoods. Yeah. I mean, the gentrification of even neighborhoods in Chicago. Where Stuart Talent ended up, back in, the late 80s when I was still in my band, you didn't want to go anywhere near there. I mean, it was dark and broken glass and homelessness, and there was needles on the ground, and holy cow. Now it's an art community, like Superior and Franklin, over there. It's gorgeous now.
Oh man, I remember early 90s going to there was a place called the Bop Shop in Wicker Park, a little music venue, and it might have been the Cocktails. You know that band?
Oh.
They were like in the early, they were kind of like in the second stage of kind of the early Lollapalooza days. Chicago band.
Oh, so they're not a Chicago band?
They were a Chicago. I mean, they were a Chicago band. But there's this place called the Bop Shop, and it was in Wicker Park. I'd never been there before, and boy, was that kind of like a rough neighborhood. And just like it was a summer, while I was still in college. I was wearing college baseball cap. I was wearing a T-shirt from a sorority party I went to in college.
Right.
Well, I got through that neighborhood, and some of the things that came at me that one night. I actually wrote a story about it for a school newspaper about that was a wild, insane night where I ended up various other parts of Chicago unwittingly, and it's a longer story than we have time for.
Where you had no idea. We were fearless back then, man. You do stuff. You're like, God, I can't believe I got through that
my
alive.
mom read that story, and she still kind of looks at me sometimes and shakes her head and just like, I can't believe you're still alive after that night.
No doubt. So Where were you before you came back to Chicago? And what brought you back to Chicago? I mean, I'm sure you missed the pizza, you know?
Well, you can get Chicago pizza anywhere now, right? Um,
Yeah, right. It's not the same, my friend.
well, it's funny. I spent my first 2 years at Northwestern, and at that point, I was like, this is fine, but I really want to get out of the Midwest. I wanted to kind of live in just different parts of the country, to have a different kind of geographic cultural experience. I transferred to the University of Virginia, and that's where I graduated. I was hoping to get a job in advertising right out of college, I had taken a class in the summer at a place called Ad Ed. There was a a night school that is now a full-time program called Chicago Portfolio School. At the time, it was night school.
Sure.
For people like me. Started putting the beginnings of an advertising portfolio together, and I got an interview. I did a compelling enough self-promo piece that I got an interview with Ogilvy Atlanta, and then I went in and I showed them the rest of my portfolio, and you could just see the disappointment on the creative director's face. And at that point, the first thing he said after he flipped through it was, "Have you considered Portfolio Center?" And I had heard of Portfolio Center just from a fellow student back in my Northwestern days. I was hoping to avoid like another 2 years of school just to put a portfolio together.
Right.
But it was made pretty abundantly clear at that point that I need a legitimate portfolio. I can try and kind of scrap my way to doing it on my own, or I can just commit, 2 years after college to do this program, put it together. And lo and behold, I actually have some learning to do before I can do actually good creative communications. So that's what I did. So I that's in Atlanta. So I went to Portfolio Center Atlanta. I spent a couple of years there. It's an 8-quarter program. I made it through 7 quarters and then figured like I can take it to finish on my own. Certificate program. I didn't care about the degree. It's all about the portfolio. And so I had a creative partner from school. We finished our portfolios on our own. Met my wife there, by the way. And our dream agency was Chiat Day, Los Angeles. Chiat Day.
Oh, yeah.
Chiat at the time, they, if you remember, bunny chasers for Energizer, the Enjoy the Ride campaign, the GI Joe commercial for Nissan. They had Jack in the Box. There's a lot happening there, and this is right before Steve Jobs had come back and brought on Chiat as his agency again. So we hit the West Coast together. West Coast is really where we wanted to be, San Francisco or Los Angeles. And we got an offer to work on Levi's at FCB San Francisco.
Wow, that's big.
And another offer to work on Nissan at Chiat Day Los Angeles. And we took the Chiat Day job, got a job in our dream agency, and we almost fucked it up. This still throws me sometimes about California, both Northern and Southern California. They hide how hard they work. It is easy to mistake kind of their casualness for laziness. Even when I've been in the Silicon Valley and I'm on the Apple campus and people are walking really slowly. You guys are building the future here. Don't you have someplace to be? Hurry up.
Yeah, right.
And so we're here in the if anybody's seen the Binoculars building in Venice Beach, that's where we were. Pretty nutty, flamboyant kind of Frank Gehry building with the Klaus Oldenburg giant sculpture. They actually had rooms inside the eyepieces of the binoculars. You drove between the eyepieces to go to the underground garage, and
we used to winter right down there. I mean, like we're wintering in Florida now. For 5 years, I wintered in Santa Monica and Venice Beach.
Yeah. And
so I know them well because I wanted to get my name out there as well.
Yeah. And it's it's actually my kids' favorite place to go on their spring break. So we actually go there quite a bit. And I still point out that Binoculars building where I used to work. But yeah, we almost fucked it up because, look at us, we're by the beach and everybody's like sitting around, kind of kicking around ideas, feet up, kind of go to kind of Main Street, Santa Monica, kind of grab your lunch at Shia, go to the beach, kind of, taking the crazies along the boardwalk, back to the office. And it felt very laid back. And so we were laid back. And we did not recognize until our boss had us down and put us on probation that we were the last ones in and the first ones out. We were those entitled young punks, not realizing how hard everybody else had worked to get into that agency. We were juniors right out of school, and we took for granted the opportunity that had been given to us. And our boss told us, and you can see it in what you're showing me. I'm not seeing the quality or the quantity that I was expecting from you based on what I saw from your portfolios to get you in here. I don't hire juniors.
Wow.
I made an exception for you guys, and you're making me look bad. And I thought that oh shit. Well, first of all, I was like, well, fuck this guy.
Of course.
Maybe this is not the business I want to be in. What does he know? What do they know? What does Shy Day know?
Right.
And so, but then it's like, okay, well, we're gonna show these guys. We're gonna be the first ones in, last ones out. We're gonna come in on weekends. And so, okay, let's get to the office at 8 a.m. and like get there and everybody's already there. Let's try 7 a.m. Everybody's already there. Okay, let's stay till 7 p.m. Everybody's already there. That's when we first found out that, Shy Day's nickname was Shy Day and Night.
Mm-hmm.
It was a long hours kind of place. Come in at 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning, everybody's already there. Okay, let's try Sunday. And that's when we started to realize like, holy shit, even though their feet are up and they look laid back, might take a break and stroll along the beach. I mean, these people are working their asses off.
Yeah.
And they're getting to quality by way of quantity. I mean, oh, that's a great idea, but don't stop there. Come up with more great ideas. Beat it.
Right.
And I owe a debt of gratitude for the guy that sat me down and put me in my place, because I don't think I'd have a career right now if I'd continued on the on the path I am. And now I would say that my work ethic and my sense of accountability is probably, for plenty of faults, but I think that's probably one of my strong suits. And I think that moment helped. I needed that kick in the ass early on.
Absolutely. Me too, dude. I got to say that, and I was blown away that at 7, 8 o'clock at night, I was getting calls from my agents telling me where to go. I said, when I first got there, I'm like, are you still in the office? They're like, yeah. California does have a chill vibe. And yes, of course, it's a laid back attitude, but it's certainly, head down, keep working, and I saw that with other actors too, which is when I was there, I started a voiceover practice group. The first year we were there, we had a really nice place with a garage that was converted into a studio that we rented. The woman that owned the building used to be an editor, so she built a studio in her back house with its own bathroom, blah, blah, blah. William Morris, who I was part of, used to have you come in pretty much every single day, and there would be a stack of scripts for you. And if you weren't ready when they called your name, they were pissed. You're sitting in a room with a bunch of people, some of them A and B lister actors, that you're like, hey. And people start blabbing.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned really quick that when they say, hey, Tim, you ready? You damn well better be ready. You better not be sitting next to your partner bullshitting, because that would happen. And they'd say, hey, Becky, are you ready? And oh, I'm so sorry. I was talking with No. Now you go all the way to the end of the line.
Mm-hmm.
And you learned really quick to get there as early as possible, 8 a.m., because there was hardly anybody there by then. I could study my scripts. It was quiet. And then I was in, I was out, and I could, spend the rest of the day either marketing or whatever. But yeah, it was amazing to me how hard my agents worked while I was there. The difference between us and Los Angeles, at least maybe this is just in the actor community, is when we say we're going to do something, we do it. We don't just say, yeah, that sounds cool. And then you never hear about it again. I think that's a Midwestern mentality or a working mentality, where I say I'm going to do so. There, people were like, wow, when you say you do something, you're really going to do it.
Yeah.
Yes. Shouldn't that be how it works?
Well, it's funny. Like I'll be honest. I was kind of running away from my kind of Wisconsin roots. I thought, it didn't have the being from Oshkosh, Wisconsin, didn't seem to have a whole lot of sex appeal to it. And so I tried to, position myself as, it was sometimes like the last thing I would reveal about myself. But I've come to learn to appreciate it and lean into it, because I mean there are definitely some good attributes, good qualities that just become kind of deeply ingrained growing up in an environment like that, especially like in a farming community like I grew up in. I mean, you want to talk about waking up early,
and lending a hand to your neighbor.
Well, yeah, I mean, I had dairy farmer friends, and I learned like you sleep over at a friend's house. Well, you sleep over at their house. Dad wakes you up at 4:30 a.m. and you're going to help feed the cows. I'm going to get cow shit all over my Nike Air Revolutions walking out in the pasture. Like, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Either I stop sleeping over at their house, or I wear different shoes.
Bring your mucklucks.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess this is the Chicago thing. I had never really set my sights on Chicago specifically. In fact, when I first ended up there as a professional, and both my wife and me, like we got married out in LA. We moved out to LA together. We got married out there. Then we moved to New York, and then Chicago was after that. I wasn't necessarily looking at Chicago specifically, But we ended up there. It was my job. I got a job at Kramer Krasel, kind of a regional agency that was trying to become more of a national player, and they were looking to recruit from the coast. It was kind of a soft job market. It was a buyer's market, I guess. And so, CK and then Leo Burnett was doing it on a larger scale, like starting to bring people from the coasts, into Chicago and looking beyond its own market to kind of bring award-winning talent in.
People from the coasts bring a different message, a different work ethic, a different vibe.
Although a lot of the people that ended up moving there are people that were originally from the Midwest, and kind of often moved for family reasons. We moved from New York because we've been married for a couple of years, and we wanted to own some real estate, not just rent it, and maybe even start a family. And so Chicago's
understood, dude. Understood.
But I'll be honest, we were those people that I've always hated, which are the people that move from New York to somewhere else and then compare that place to New York and how inferior their new home is to the place they just came from. Mm-hmm. And I was that person. I was so obnoxious because it's so hard not to compare Chicago to New York because there's so many similarities. The meeting starting with casual chit chat and kind of getting to know and some pleasantries, and even though I hadn't lived in New York that long, the idea of just cut to the bullshit, cut to the chase. Let's get this meeting started. And and my boss sat me down at one point and told me like John, you need to soften your New York edge a little bit. And I was just like, instead of like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize I had that. I was kind of like, fucking hey, I've got a New York edge. All right,
I'm a badass now.
I'm from Wisconsin, and I've got a New York edge after only living there for a few years. Like, good on me.
Don't mess with me. Do not mess with me.
New York is a place that does not hide how hard they work. They take it to
no doubt about
extremes. It. Yeah, you can see it's right there.
There's a reason why they say it's the city that never sleeps.
Yeah, you can see the throbbing forehead veins in that city.
You bet. And Chicago had that too, especially when I first started, man. And even before that, the 60s, 70s, Chicago was the hardest working advertising agency town outside of New York in the country. You can tell in all the iconic shit that Leo Burnett has created blows my mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then Doyle Dane Bernbach,
Yeah.
It blows my mind. All the iconic spots that came from Chicago.
Yeah. So good place to be. We came around. I got a promotion, and that's when I realized, with a little bit more money, I was promoted to creative director at a pretty young age. I was only 5 years in the business. It immediately had me reconsidering maybe we do stay in Chicago after all. Took my wine out that night, had some good food and wine, and thinking like, okay, remember why we moved here?
Yeah.
And then I also worked with somebody who had moved from. She'd actually moved from Miami, and she said one thing that she does in Chicago is make sure like every weekend she goes to a different neighborhood. And if you want to really appreciate Chicago, that's the way to do it. Don't just kind of stick in your own little area and kind of stick to one tribe.
No doubt.
And so we started doing that, and then that's the point at which we fell in love. We made a conscious choice to like Chicago, and this is what we're going to do to get there, and it worked.
Sure.
And so, other than a brief interlude in 2011 where we moved to LA and back in the same year, I've been in Chicago ever since.
That's wonderful, man. That's wonderful. I'm a lifer. I've lived in Chicago my whole life. Other than, wintering other places, just to get like you wanting to get a flavor of what it's like to be there in another part of the world, another part of the country, or traveling. Yeah, we've gone to Puerto Rican town, Ukrainian town, the Indian neighborhoods, the Spanish neighborhoods. It's just, there's just so many cool things to do there.
Yeah.
Chicago is just, there's such a plethora of things to do, to see, to feel, to eat. Chicago, 7 months out of the year, is a great town to be in. I do not like to freeze my ass off. I never have. I was a paper boy for a while, so yeah, you can keep the cold. I know I'm coming back in a week, and it's gonna be cold.
Yeah. Well, this is the roughest time of year. It's beautiful falls and summers. But the delayed thaw, spring, I think, is the hardest time.
That's all right. I'm still going to jump on my mountain bike and take off. I miss that, but that's the one thing I miss when I'm down here.
Yeah.
I can't really mountain bike. Now, did you always want to be, what was your initial plan when you got out of school? It sounds like you were kind of brailing the world when you got out of school, you weren't quite sure you wanted to be an advertiser? What was your epiphany moment that you said,
Oh no,
I want to write commercials?
I tell people my life to a certain point has gone eerily according to plan. To what it was sophomore year is kind of the point at which I decided in advertising creative. That's what I want to be. But growing up where I did, obviously I don't have anybody that can give me. There are no advertising people. I mean, there were small little local agencies in Oshkosh, but trying to find somebody that could give me some guidance on how you break into it. I called a bunch of places in Chicago. Actually, I remember when I was in high school, and I got there's a guy named Gary Gussick. He was the creative lead. It was like Arian Low Travis Gussick, I think was the name of the agency.
Sure.
Pretty gruff character, but I mean, really appreciated him taking the call because I'm like some nobody kid. Nobody else picked up the phone, but I just don't know if I just called at the right time. He picked up the phone. I'm stammering my way toward hoping he can give me some guidance on what do I need to study, how do I go into advertising, and specifically become a creative in advertising. And he was pretty gruff with me. And basically, my takeaway is people just kind of stumble into creative departments. They're either scraped up off the street, they're poets. Right. The ways they kind of stumbled into it, the ways they were discovered. And I can't say I was any clearer on what I need to study in college or which school to go to from that conversation. But I was prepared that this will not be a strictly academic path. I come from an academic family. My dad was a professor, my mom a teacher. My siblings have gone into different fields, but ultimately made their way into academia somehow. And the academic path. So my sister wants to be a lawyer. Go to college, major in this, go to law school, you become a lawyer. Become an advertising creative wasn't quite as clear until they started creating these schools like Portfolio Center, Creative Circus.
Sure.
BC Branson or Miami Ad School. And Portfolio Center was, that was kind of the only one. And it took me some time, through high school and kind of going to college and then transferring to another school and finally meeting somebody. It's just like, suck it up, go to one of these schools. You're lucky they exist now. They didn't always. And it's another 2 years, more student debt, but you will come out with a employable portfolio. My parents, again, being academics, like a place that costs as much as a real grad school, but is a certificate program, a for-profit school that they had never heard of. That is at the end of a string of parking lots off of Peachtree Boulevard in a small little warehouse building. And that's okay. So you went to the Northwestern University of Virginia, and now you're in a little warehouse in a broken up parking lot, and that's.
But that's what it takes, though. You have to go to those seedy little businesses to get your chops, Yeah. And you learn. I mean, you learn by failing. I mean, that's how I always learned, by failing.
Boy, were my parents worried though. It's like they were not sure about this school, and it's like, is this? This sounds like a job that you're not going to get. It's just,
why would they say that?
It sounds like a crapshoot.
Thanks for the support, Pops.
I mean, it probably equivalent to like somebody saying I want to be an actor, right? How do you become a successful actor?
I did, and my mother was rather supportive of it because she wanted to be an actress too. She did a lot of that stuff. So as a child, I knew I was going to be a performer of some type, especially once I figured out I could sing. So for me, it was church choir, rock band by 8th grade, rock band all through high school. And then I started getting into acting too, won awards for my acting. And I was like, okay, I can do both. And I said, well, I don't know which one's going to win. And it's funny because they both ended up winning because I ended up starting in Jingles, getting into voiceovers, and Jingles just kind of fell to the wayside. And here I am now, a voice actor. And praise God, I'm one of the top guys, so that's a good thing. It's a good place to be. And like you, I went to those seedy schools. I went to a bunch of seedy Chicago schools, and when I was in LA, it was called the super secret garage. And the top voiceover guys in Los Angeles used to get together in this guy's garage, sit in a circle, right. And we'd riff off each other. Most of them were promo guys, but some of them were character guys. I mean, I met Dave Fenoy there, and Thompson Howell. I mean, all these guys that are just brilliant voice actors. Speaking of creativity, One of my favorite questions to ask is this one. When, where, and how do you come up with your creative moment? I mean, you seem like you're incredibly disciplined. I'm getting that sense from you because of your parents, who they were, and your work ethic and what you learned going along in the business. When do you find your most creative moments? Is there something you do? When does the light bulb go on for you with stuff?
It's funny. I coming up with creative ideas for me often is a very conscious act. Now it depends. Now if I'm like really deeply immersed in something for a long period of time, I can have those like bolts of inspiration in the shower. When I'm really under the gun, working under deadline, and trying to deliver, something that at least meets my creative standards, and I'm not there yet. That's when I tend to lose sleep. That kind of wake up at 3, 4 a.m. I actually try to jot down some of the thoughts that happen in my head at that time, and then I read them in the morning, and they're all complete shit. They're not nearly as brilliant as I thought they were in the middle of the night.
That's okay.
But yeah, it's typically my job's pretty demanding at this point because this thing that we call Team DDB for the Army is 9 agencies, and I'm the creative lead over all of it. So it's not just the DDB work, kind of the awareness level brand narratives, video, social, but it's CRM, it's digital, it's kind of thinking through the entire journey through filling out the form that goes to the recruiter, and then how do we keep people engaged to make sure they go through the steps to ultimately sign a contract. And I have to do some pretty serious calendar management if it's me sitting down and kind of like coming up with creative ideas on my own. And I still make time to do that. You got to be careful, as you become, especially an executive creative director. I think I'm good at giving feedback. I want to make sure that people actually have like concrete direction from me, so they understand. Like, this is what's working and this is what is not. Here's where to push. Here's what I'm killing and why. So, that's a skill in of itself. And I suppose I apply those to kind of evaluating my own ideas. But I mean, you've got to still remain a creative. And I do it both personally and professionally. But I have to block time on my calendar. So when I said it's a very conscious act, I have blocked from 11 to 1, and I'll eat during that time. Like, this is my time to kind of actually through some creative ideas. And I usually do it. I'm no longer leaning forward on the desk. I am now in a recumbent position. The way I'm sitting seems to kind of like open up that valve that allows creative ideas to come.
Same for voice actors, dude. Same thing.
Yep. And I try to keep it as analog a process as possible, at least at first. So, go down a lot of internet wormholes. If I like, okay, I've got a spark of idea, I need to know a little bit more to kind of develop it further and see if there's a there. So I can't help myself from picking up my device when I think I've got something and see like, is there something else that might inform that and see if it becomes something real. But I try as much as I can to. I've got a whole bunch of I've always like an A5 notebook, and I scribble in this thing, and I make sure that the pen is always moving.
I still use the school ledger.
Yeah, I need something that. Well, I think it's because this is kind of like journal, size, right. Diary size. So kind of there's something that feels like a little bit more less professional, more personal. I think maybe that's, I don't know. But what is about the kind of notebook and the kind of pen that I use? But I find that I kind of need to keep the pen moving, even if it drifts off into complete gibberish. And then I also don't get stuck on any one idea for too long, even if I think it's the most brilliant thing ever. Like, just like, okay, got it, document it, draw some brackets around it, and I can come back to that and develop it further. Now let's move on.
Let the brain keep moving.
Yeah. And then I guess I kind of tell myself, okay, so I'm going to do a tangent on this idea that could become something completely different, or I'm going to do the complete opposite of that idea. I've read books on different techniques to kind of open up different portals. Do the opposite is a tactic I use often.
The artist's way. It sounds like you're a big proponent of the artist's way.
Hey, Whipple, Squeeze This by Luke Sullivan. Like,
so many creatives have said they read that book.
Yeah, when he talks about and he's just talking about writing headline.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see like what his process is for covering every possible angle, talk about like quantity to get to quality. It's just like a photographer. What is the difference between like good and bad photography? It's like take more shots, have more contact sheets to kind of choose what the best stuff is.
Right. Rapid fire, baby.
Yeah. Now when I was freelancing, I spent quite a bit of time at Apple, and Apple was interesting because that's a place where you often knew where it was going to head up, where it was going to go, because ultimately they really wanted just there's more often clarity over cleverness. So make sure that the product's value proposition comes through as simply and clearly as possible. And honestly, probably could have spent a day getting there, but what you do there is you basically on every assignment, you need to come up with every single possible permutation of messaging and creative expression that is conceivable by the human brain before then eventually through the process of editing and then fire it back up again and fire it back up again. So you want to talk about volume. It's basically we're going to make sure we come up with everything conceivable before we make the decision on which way we're going to go.
Mm-hmm.
And one example of that was when they came out with the product red version of the iPhone. It was the iPhone 7. And that's a big deal because up to that point, Apple had only done accessories for product red. The fact that they're taking the most successful
tie-in with Bono, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Bono's big with product red, and lots of brands, and basically it's the global fund. So a portion of the proceeds of product red products go to the global fund, and specifically their goal is to eliminate the passage of HIV from a mother to her unborn child. And they're making a lot of progress toward that. And Apple, contributed the lion's share to the global fund already. But now, if you're going to come out with a product red version of the most successful consumer product in history, just imagine what that will do. Not only can put more funds into the global fund, but how it can accelerate their progress toward eliminating this problem in mainly in sub-Saharan Africa.
Sure.
So, lots you could say about that, right? Now the product red version of the Apple iPhone, where it's not just the iPhone case, it's the phone itself. Just think about this thing from an altruistic standpoint. Think about this, the significance of the color red for the Chinese market. Thinking about it just from a kind of pure aesthetic standpoint, and thousands upon thousands of headlines and angles and ways of talking about this thing. And I was not the only one working on it, but I was working on the website at the time, and the website oftentimes, at least at the time, got a bit of a head start because the development time, you had to cut pencils down earlier to go into development, which meant that we get a head start on trying to figure out how to articulate the value proposition, which would then make its way into retail, which would make its way into the video work, which would make its way into the keynote speech that Tim Cook would deliver, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And so thousands of lines about and all these different angles. They had really, really incredible talent at Apple, including their strategic planners and just some of the human insights that they fed me. It's oh, that's amazing. And so after all of that, iPhone 7 now in product red. Yeah. And I would say 9 times out of 10, that's where they ended up.
Clean.
It's after all of this, it's just you know what, let's just keep it clean, say it straight.
That's right.
Don't try and confuse it. Don't try to have too many double entendres. Just come right out and say it. And that's what we love about Apple as consumers. Is just it's elegant, minimalist simplicity.
Those are great words. I mean, that's been their whole, especially after Jobs came on. Their whole thing has been elegant, simplicity, clean. I mean, it's just everything is just streamlined. Keep it simple. I still have a copy of Steve Jobs' graduation speech. Don't be too showy. It's exactly what they still embody today. What a great campaign to have to work on. I'm sure.
I worked on it a couple times. One, so when I mentioned I was at Chiat. So the weekend before I started is when Think Different launched. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the ones who see things differently. You can vilify them, blah, blah, blah. The ones who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
Richard Dreyfuss.
Although Steve Jobs, they originally recorded Steve Jobs doing it, and he was ultimately uncomfortable it being his voice. And so they went into casting, and Richard Dreyfuss was chosen. Mm-hmm. But the boss that I told you that kind of read me the riot act, I'm fucking up this incredible opportunity, he's the one that wrote that. The brand manifesto that has been copied a million times since. I thought it was actually the Apple Nissan group that I had joined there. Well, they spun off Apple into its own thing. So I was mainly focused on car for most of my time there. But I dabbled on the Apple account a little bit, and mostly on their product advertising. I wasn't the one kind of picking who's the next kind of cultural icon that's going to be on a different billboard. It was how do we talk about the G3 tower and its Pentium crushing chip? That kind of stuff. Project Yosemite. It was more that kind of stuff, which was the majority of the work on Apple. Right? We think about the Mac versus PC. We think about 1984. We think about the Think Different with the cultural icons and the iPod silhouettes. But most of the work on Apple is at the product level because they make such amazing products. Get your clever concepts out of the way,
right,
of this beautiful thing we have made, ad guy. And so beyond the inside, I would say it was not frustrating at all because I was freelance. and I loved the freelance phase of my career. I did it for about 4.5 years. And some of the things that might get you down otherwise when you're on the inside, well, number one, if an agency is being really inefficient and making a lot of work for itself, that's an opportunity for a freelancer. And as long as the check's clear, from a transactional standpoint, don't get any more efficient on my behalf, agency.
That's right.
There's a crisis. There's a crisis because, oh shit, we're losing a lot of business. Bring on the freelancer. Or there's a crisis because we won too much business and don't have the resources to service all of it. Bring on the freelancer. In the case of Apple, because that's what the process was, it afforded me the opportunity to actually to spend more time there. and kind of go through that whole process. And every place that I went inside, I took as much of an interest in how the place operated as I did into the projects that I was given. What makes this place tick? Like, how do they manage their people? I loved kind of standing at the periphery of like all hands agency meetings and see okay, what do they do to motivate their employees or inadvertently dispirit their employees? Which places have, I think, like a good, strong, admirable culture, and which ones hyper political. I was almost as much of an organizational spy as much as I was a creative.
And I think that's where great ideas come from. That's where great concepts come from. You're now an insider.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not just a guy that's writing an ad for the company. You are the company.
Mm-hmm.
So now you see how things happen, why they happen, the reason they happen, and the outcome of those things. So you can speak with heart, soul, spirit. You can give the sense of the spirit of the organization.
Yeah.
Once it loses its heart, organizations usually crumble.
Yeah. And if you become like the brand voiceover, I mean, what is a brand? It is the personification of a company.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if you get that role, especially for any brand of scale, I mean, you are that person.
That's right.
You are that personification of their company. So what does that company want to be? Like, what tone would it take? How would it talk to people? How does it listen?
Right. What's the color? What's the texture?
Yeah.
What's the feel? What's the music of it? I mean, it's all, as an artist, we're both artists. You're on one side of the glass, I'm on the other, but I mean, that's what we have to add. We have to add the musicality of it, the feel, that why does this touch me? That's what you and I have to add, is why does this touch me?
Mm-hmm.
Why do I want this in my life? Why do I want this, need this, whatever that is, and you going inside these companies, I would imagine you went inside the Army for a while, or you're still going inside to see how things work, or the military. I mean, you've got a base. So, I think that's just brilliant of you to do that. I mean, I don't know how often creatives get that chance, but you can write as an outsider, or you can write as somebody that's on the inside. And that's awesome.
Yeah.
How many people have to answer to you these days at DDB?
Well, again, it's Team DDB. So I better be careful here so I don't forget somebody. We're DDB. DDB is considered the prime agency. So a lot of times when these holding companies create these things, and they kind of give everybody like an equal seat at the table. But DDB is the throat to choke, so to speak. So we are the ones, and the other agencies are considered subcontractors of DDB. There's a point I want to make about that in a moment. But so you've got DDB. So I'm a DDB employee. DDB's on my paycheck. But other mostly Omnicom agencies. So we've got Fluent 360 as our multicultural agency, and they've got some really strong creatives. That I really enjoy working with. All of them have strong creatives and strategists that I really enjoy working with.
We're two lucky guys, John. We are just two lucky guys.
Yeah.
See, last thing I did for you guys was Miller Lite for Super Bowl. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was fun. Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
Relatable Farmer. I remember that
Metaverse one.
Relatable Farmer.
Well, I don't want to take too much more of your time. I know you've got to get going, and we've been gabbing on here. You know what? Let's just jump to the very last question. And that's, is there any advice you would give either an actor or a creative person just jumping into the business, like you calling Gary? I mean, is there any advice you want to give either a young actor or a young creative jumping in?
Well, this is going to sound like I'm singing the DDB party line, but when kind of a new articulation we have for our talent strategy, our people strategy. And this is, I need to give credit to Britt Nolan, who's back at Leo Burnett now, but this is his handle. No duplicates.
Yes.
And what that means is, there's a whole thing about, bringing your whole self to work, right? But how do you create a place comprised of distinct and unique individuals. So you could have two profoundly talented people, but if they're the same kinds and stripes of talented people, it's duplicative. How do you bring somebody else who's also talented, but that can bring a different set of perspectives, different professional experience that came from somewhere else? They grew up differently. They have a different cultural frame of reference. They're into different movies and music than I am. And so really leaning into like figuring out like who you intrinsically are. So rather than kind of putting on upfront, and I listen to the Smart List podcast a lot, and they talk about some of the mistakes that young actors make, thinking about like how do I stand out?
Mm-hmm.
And they try too hard. They assume a kind of character that they think the person's looking for, or they see the room full of other actors and like how do I differentiate myself? The one thing you have going for you, your one distinct advantage that you have over everybody else as a presenter is that nobody else is you.
You be you.
So if you want to differentiate, lean into yourself. Be yourself. I think when an actor comes in the room, and look, we have to make decisions. I mean, whether we're listening to a voice or we see somebody kind of come into the casting room, we've got 15, 30 seconds to tell our little mini narratives. And so we can't necessarily bring in a person that maybe doesn't look quite right, but they've got really strong acting chops. And over the course of an hour and a half movie, it'll make sense why we cast them. No, I mean and my actor friends, like some of them like complain about this, which is like I come in and if I don't look right to you, I don't have a shot no matter how good an actor I am.
That's right.
Sorry, but it's 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So there's that, right? So if you somehow don't kind of fit the look, or there's just you don't have the right physiognomy of the face that reads as likability, like all these kinds of things. But what are the things that are most distinctively you? Let me have a sense of who you are as a human being, as opposed to the thing that you thought would differentiate you in a crowded field, which may not be true to yourself, but you made a kind of a strategic play thinking that would do it. I think more often than not, that doesn't work. It's the thing. It's when you feel like you kind of know the person,
the persona,
and you know them within a couple seconds. That's a very powerful thing. And that authenticity is an obnoxiously overused word, but I'm going to use it anyway. Am I getting a sense of this person's authentic self? And then likability, unless you're playing the villain, right? I mean, likability, but I think that is something that will contribute to likability because there aren't too many brands that want unlikable talent in front of the camera on their behalf.
I think you can still play the villain and still have some kind of a redeeming quality deep down inside.
Yeah.
You have to want this. I mean, if you're just deep and dark, that's just icky,
Yeah,
So,
I wanted to just quickly say, like I've had a meandering career. So I mean, I started off in traditional agency, doing what I wanted. Started my dream agency, you cut your teeth on print and on radio. You have to be a little, they tell writers like be careful about showing too much proficiency in radio because you need to become the radio person and you get all of those briefs at the expense of everything else. But man, it's such a fun medium that the writer can own.
It is. Theater of the mind, baby.
Theater of the mind.
For voice actors, it's a blast. 2 actors or 3 actors in a room facing each other. We are actually having the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really, really cool to get a radio job because it's totally theater of the mind. We have to make you see and feel what's going on. And, if you give me a well-written script and you cast us because we were the right people, there's nothing like it.
When I came back to DDB and when I was at Sapient Nitro, I told them, like, look, as I'm hiring more creatives, you guys are probably comfortable with me. I kind of model your behaviors. I seem kind of analytical to you, but brace yourselves. The circus is fucking coming to town. I'm bringing on the weirdos. The weirdos are coming. And let me explain to you their temperament. And then sure enough, they came and it was like, like, wow, these are emotional people. And it's like, yeah, isn't it great? This place was so boring before. And so now to be back in a place where that just understands the expressive side, understands just like these strangely emotional aspects of the business that we're in. And, just like the interesting range of kind of unique and flamboyant personalities, not just within the agency, but, getting back and, more deeply. Now I'm back into it in a very big way. And production companies and directors and talent both in front of the camera and voiceover and those kinds of things. And boy, it's so nice to be, in a company of this range of personalities.
Sure.
Because I kind of had a break from it. I did the technical analytical side, and now I'm back into like I'm back amongst the weirdos, and I find myself very comfortable here.
I love that. You're amongst the storytellers again. You know, we may only have 1 minute to do it or less, but it's great to be able to tell those stories and really convey a message that touches people in a way that really only advertising can. All right, so thanks for answering the question I was going to ask you without me even asking it. This is lightning round questions.
Okay.
If you weren't doing this, what would you be doing? It sounds like you'd be a writer.
Well, not necessarily.
Okay, there we go. All right, then, if you weren't doing this, what would you be doing, John?
Novelist, cartoonist, product designer, architect, street artist.
Street artist. Okay. You mean like...
Well, I just like. Oh, so I mean, you asked me about my shirt. This is Hebrew Brantley, the Chicago-based street artist. I just like the pop graphic, style. That's kind of like the thing I'm into.
Awesome, dude. I love cartoons. I love street art. I love. There's a building here in Tampa that was just left completely abandoned, and a brewery bought it, and they had a street artist come and do the whole side of the building. It's awesome. All over St. Pete's too. There's a guy that. There's a company. The guy built a company off doing street art. He was just in the paper. Mm-hmm. So that's very cool.
And Chicago has some amazing street art and street artists.
Yeah. All right. So then we go on. Where do you see advertising? Hey, even all of our business in the next 5 years. Where do you see it going? What do you see it doing?
Well, I've thought about this a lot because I'm trying to future-proof my own career, and that's part of why I went into the digital transformation space. But I think you're gonna. And not everybody would agree with me. I think you're going to see a bit more of a return toward the appreciation of human instinct, even as all this AI and all these bots are being developed to even like come up with creative expression to write. Robots are writing novels these days. AI is creating movie trailers these days. I enjoy a lot of the kind of like the technological possibilities. I'm also eyes wide open toward surveillance capitalism and what it means for people not realizing the extent to which they've kind of sacrificed their personal data. I think you're going to see just a little bit more of a tilt toward kind of the expressive side of the business and why you need human instinct and emotion combined with a relentless focus on what the data tells you, what's working and what's not. It's data informed human instinct and expression as opposed to data-led creativity, which just the very sound of it sounds like coldly rational, too terribly sophisticated, and what we call the hidden cognitive effects that actually influence somebody's like receptiveness to ultimately taking an action. So there's still a lot of non-clickable media out there. We're trying to inspire some brain activity that is, unless you put like MRIs on people's head all the time, you're not going to save the data that tells me like, okay, synapses are fired, which means 6 months from now, they're going to be receptive to a message that actually inspires purchase.
Right.
Now we think about that a lot with the Army because that's not a buy now situation. It's a process. And if you're just on the fence, it's going to take some time and a number of messages to get you to think like, okay, I'm going to finally start to talk to a recruiter. Anyway, I think I'm on the side of human beings, but also not oblivious to the influence of data and technology on the decisions that we make.
Right. We don't want to be a bunch of automatons either. I think that's what's going to happen now too. And just to get your message across, if it's a YouTube commercial or something like that, I'm like, that's a real voice. No, it's not. It's a computer.
Yeah.
So, we're always wondering, is that going to, and it is, it's already starting to take the place. I'm seeing more animation rather than using an actor, or I see CGI rather than using an actor. And then all they have to do is hire the voice actor to fill in the blanks. But, and it's only a matter of time before they may not need us as much either. But again, like you said, there's something about the human emotion that a computer at this time can't match, can't bring to human peoples. Yeah. And I hope it stays that way for the foreseeable future. Because
I don't know how you replicate unless think about music. So we will hire a music company to create a track for a discrete 30-second piece of film. Some amazing music companies out there making some amazing music. But then when you license a track that was made for very personal reasons by
an artist, a recording artist,
musician. Yeah. How do you recreate not just something that sounds like the Beatles, but has the soul of the Beatles and kind of the context and the frame of reference that they brought and the emotion that they put into the music? And they're really hard things to kind of like parse out. But there are aspects of what human beings can put into a performance, whether it's music, whether it's voice, whether it's in front of the camera. That I mean, if you're doing a big giant CGI movie, you can hide those things because they're just supplementing the big visuals. And we've done those campaigns for the Army as well. I'm looking at another campaign that's got a lot of CGI people in it. We need the human beings as live action assets.
Sure.
So no, I'm doing that work. You still need the human beings in different ways. It depends on what your aims are. Again, having worked on a little bit more on the deeper technology side and working with people that didn't fully understand human emotion. Let me explain that to you in coldly rational terms. And human beings are still emotional creatures. We are all more Homer Simpson than we are Mr. Spock. Emotional decision making, the decisions that we make for better or worse, for commerce or not, are still driven more by our emotions.
Ranges of emotion, sure.
Than our cold, calculating, rational sides of our brains. And it's going to be a while before machines can replicate basic human instinct, even if we can have a hard time articulating the human instinct to understand those emotions and how to motivate.
And let's hope that's a long time away.
Yeah, if I can be retired at that point, that's my goal.
Exactly my point, my friend.
I'm thinking about people that retired, that are, something's like amazing retired ad veterans.
You pishes deal with that. I'm retired.
I bet a lot of them are like extremely happy they got out.
No doubt.
Before now, right? It's complicated.
Dude, I've been doing this now for more years than I'm going to admit on this show, but I still love it every single day. Yeah. And I'm still juiced by it. That's why this podcast came to be. Talking about creative stuff, I was listening to lots of podcasts, and I was listening, like you, to voiceover podcasts, and I said, the one person that I've never heard them interview are the creatives. It's always voiceover to voiceover, voiceover to casting director, or voiceover to agent, or, it was never the people that hire you. And like you going inside Apple, like you going inside the Army, basically what I'm doing is I'm going inside your brain. I'm like, how, and I know it's not, initially it was for selfish reasons I started this, because I did want to learn how you guys think and how you get there.
Yeah.
But it's been great for other people, other actors, other young creatives listening to the show that said, wow, I didn't realize that that's what it took to get there. So again, empathy is the word of the day for any actor or for any startup creative. It's one of those, it's just empathy for the process and how difficult it is to get from your notebook where you're coming up with ideas to what we see on our screen, and all the steps that need to be taken from that piece of paper to the place where it's on our screen.
Hey, I got a question for you. This is a question I could Google, but since I've got you, I'm ashamed to say I don't play Halo, but my boys do. So who are you?
I am 343 Guilty Spark, monitor of Installation 04.
All right. That's the kind of shit that's going to impress them.
If you Google that, a million things will come up with Guilty Spark on YouTube and me being interviewed and me being in front of live audiences. It's silly. So who knows? Everybody keeps asking me if you're about to ask me, am I going to be in the series? I have no idea. The fact that on episode 3, Master Chief was just meeting Cortana, that means we're really early in the story. Because when you enter Halo 1, the first scene is with, I'm sure you know who Pete Stacker is. It's the first scene is with Steve Downs as Master Chief, Pete Stacker as Captain Keyes, and Cortana. So Cortana's already in the picture in the very first scene. I'm actually going to interview them next, too. 343 wants me to interview them, so that'll be fun.
That's a level of understanding of that franchise that I was not capable of asking you. I do game Grand Theft Auto, Red Dead Redemption, Assassin's Creed. My boys play Call of Duty, so they've heard Pete's voice. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
What makes Chicago? You say you're one of the guys, and Pete as well. Like, what is it about Chicago that makes it strong voiceover talent, like Chicago over indexes on that. And I noticed that when I moved here because I've subjected my creatives to kind of sifting through the 300 voices they get through something like Voice Bank, and they'll have people from LA and New York and Chicago and Houston and maybe it's just what my bias is, but the Chicago voices. When I talk about the humanity, the authenticity, people that you'd actually want to be in the room with, talk to, and I just there's a likability that came through the batch of Chicago voice talent, and it makes sense to me, therefore, that some of the lions of voiceover are in Chicago. But what is it about Chicago?
Initially, sir, it was because we had the breadbasket voice. We didn't sound like we were from New York, and we didn't sound like we were from California. Because there's absolutely a California accent.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, even if you're just having a conversation, it's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't sound like we were from Canada
mm-hmm.
or from the South.
Yep.
It was a likability, a trustability. It was blank white canvases. And, the thing with Chicago is if you were truly a gifted actor or a gifted voice actor, like myself, you studied all the stuff around you. So we can give you more stuff. When I first started, and certainly in the 70s and 80s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, Chicago was very much a packaged goods town. That's how it built its business. So we had to build our character base too. But just the straight announce guys, it was just a breadbasket voice. Mm-hmm. And that likability factor, I think that's where that comes from. Just my opinion. Now, California got very, very popular for that chillaxed kind of read. There's a California vibe in the voice now.
Yeah.
Things seem to be shifting back and forth too. That's changed a lot. But to answer your initial question, it was initially just that guy next door voice.
Yeah. Geographically neutral, kind of like with news anchors, right?
Exactly.
Isn't there a part of Michigan that they've identified as like, this is the dialect with no dialect?
Parts of Indiana, Michigan, Chicago. I haven't met a person yet tonight. You do not at all have a Wisconsin accent. Now, my buddy has been in this business forever, and he still sounds like he's from Wisconsin. He still says a boat, and he talks like a Wisconsin person. You know what I mean? It's just a thing.
I go back and people wonder where I grew up because there's certain words where it comes out still. Again, maybe because my parents are not from Wisconsin and the household I grew up in.
It's possible.
But the O's, Wisconsin, that's where it comes out.
Yeah, right. And it's funny because I don't. My wife is not a Deezer, but she sounds like she's from Chicago. Getting into acting classes and listening to people speak. When I first got in this business, I used to walk around with a little mini recorder. I'm like, ooh, that's an interesting voice. So where are you from? And you just have a conversation with this guy, and I'd record it. And I'd add it to my list of stuff and just listen, absorb. Okay, what's hot, what's not. There was a gentleman that's probably before your time that used to be the guy in Chicago, and his name was Larry Moran.
I know the name. Yep.
Sure. Larry Moran, the funny voice man, literally ran from session to session. But Larry gave me the keys to the kingdom, man. He said, if you're not in a session, you should be studying. You should be working, practice, listen, And I still tell young actors that. Sure, they want you. They want the you. But if they need you to steer a little bit this way or a little bit that way, you got to have that in your tool belt. So anyway.
Yeah, that's a talent that I'm pretty good at mimicry. I can mimic people's like mannerisms and tics, their inflections, and kind of the ways they talk, except accents. I am complete shit at accents. I don't even have a passable British accent, which everybody's got one of those. But for some reason, I can get somebody's mannerisms down, and I can do a pretty good interpretation of someone's personality, except for accents.
Well, that's a skill set, man. But you're you. You're just you being you, but you're bringing in somebody else. All actors do that. It's like, when you're a young musician, you rip somebody because you honor them, you respect them, and then eventually you find your own voice. That way I was the character guy. I mean, I started out as one of the character guys in Chicago, and for the first 10, 15 years, that's all I did. Hey, here's what the character looks like. What would you do with him? I only
do it to make fun of people. You've actually built a career on it. who knows? I'm sure it's contributed to my career in strange ways. But
Well, wait till you hear the loud. I've just recorded just before you. I'm still editing him. I worked with him on Outrageous Acts of Science. So the whole time we worked together, I mean, he had the craziest exit. It was all over the place. So I'm just about done editing him. He's going to be up just before you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to listen to a British accent, boy, he's got it in spades.
Yeah, well, I'll break it down. Not having a British accent is, I think, a professional liability. I got to work on that.
All right, brother. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the show. It was really great to meet you and to have you on. And this has just been fantastic. I've been doing this long enough now. It's time for me to give back. You know, I'm actually going to start your show.
I was going to say that about you.
It's about time to give back.
Tim, it's time that you gave back.
It is time.
Damn it.
Damn it. You're a punk kid. You don't get it. You're still working to put your kids through school. All right, brother. Well, thank you again for coming on, and you'll be up on the air.
Yeah, thanks, man. And let me know.
Well, gang, as I said in the outset, that was John Carstens, the executive creative director of Team DDB in Chicago. Man, he is a wise man, and there is no doubt in my mind why he got where he is because of his work ethic and the way he dives into projects. So thanks again, John, and thank you all again for coming to Creatives Flow with a VO. On our next show, I'm simply going to drop this little hint as to who our next guest will be.
Greetings, Reclaimers. I am 343 Guilty Spark, monitor of Installation 04.
That's it. If you're a Halo nerd, you know which company will be joining me on the next Creatives Flow with a VO. Until then, as always, find your flow. See ya.